I won't be dissipated. Just give it to the airport, put me on a plane. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. We're running into the 230s, I believe, now. It's either 229 or 230, one or the other. This evening, we're going to be discussing, we're heading back to the 2000s, I believe. When did this come out? I had it in front of me. Here we go. So this, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, the Ultimate Spider-Man issues 22 through 27 came out starting in July of 2002. That was the cover date. On sale date apparently was May of 2002. Issue 27, our final issue we're covering tonight, ended in November of 2002. So yeah, we're heading back to 2002 here to talk Ultimate Spider-Man. On this podcast, Mark Radulich, the patriarch of the Radulich in Broadcasting Network. Sir, you ready to talk some Ultimate Spider-Man tonight?
I am. I read every issue of the Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man, starting at issue 1 all the way up through the issues we're going to cover tonight, which was 20 through 27.
Dang. All right. Well, I know another man that followed suit, as a matter of fact. He did the same thing. His name is Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong, you read from issue 1 all the way up to the current issue, correct?
Yeah, I did. I've kind of had these on the back burner for a while, intending to go back and reread the Ultimate Spider-Man run, Bendis' run, and so I thought this is a good chance to jump back into it. So I started at the beginning, and I finished about 7 minutes before I jumped on here.
Very good. Well,
it's like completing your homework in class, right?
So, well, you guys definitely have a lot more on the background of this story, than I do, because I just read the issues that I just did the required. No extra credit here, sir. No
have
extra
you read
credit.
Any other Ultimate Spider-Man before this?
I think I may have jumped into some of the earlier issues. I know I own a few of them, but I don't know if I've actually had the chance to go back and read a good bit of them. I have like 2 copies, I think, of that Free Comic Book Day issue 1. Mm-hmm. I know the premise. I know what we're doing in the Ultimate Spider-Man or the Ultimate Universe here, but I have not. So you guys will, we are going to, before we jump into this, I'm going to give the floor to you guys to kind of catch us up on what happens. But yeah, Brian Michael Bendis, he's been writing this thing since issue 1. This is, again, like I said, 2002 that we're talking about these particular issues, but I think like Ultimate Spider-Man number 1 came out in, was it like 2000? Does that
Correct.
sound about right? Okay. So
October of 2000 through June of 2011.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark, tell us why we're doing this book, because we always have a reason as to what we're covering usually. So what are we doing here?
Spider-Man does whatever Nick Fury tells him to. Spider-Man Far From Home it came out this past Tuesday, as a matter of fact, almost a week ago from this, when this podcast is airing, which is now, time to travel. And so tomorrow night, from my hospital bed, I will be reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home with Robert Winfrey and Alexis Hana. And so there's 1.10 quadrillion Spider-Man comics out there.
Close.
In just this universe. So that being said, there were a lot of choices, and initially I had wanted to do the Return of the Sinister Six series because
I remember
Mysterio.
that.
Yeah, Mysterio is a big part of that. Mysterio is the villain played by Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie. So I thought, okay, there's my connective tissue. And then I thought, everything I'm reading about this movie, this isn't really the Mysterio that we know from the comics. More of what's being dealt with in the movie is Spider-Man's relationship to Nick Fury. So then I started feverishly Googling Spider-Man Nick Fury to see what would come up with. And I got a lot of shipping.
I didn't expect that.
Got him. And I found that there was a cartoon, I think, called Ultimate Spider-Man, where he actually worked directly for S.H.I.E.L.D., and he was kind of like a 21 Jump Street take on Spider-Man. It was like him, Iron Fist, Power Man, White Tiger, and Nova we're like all like high school students, but also superheroes, but also SHIELD agents. So I was looking for the inspiration of that, and it turns out it was Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic book, wherein the issues that we're going to deal with, Nick Fury pretty much tells Peter Parker, I can't do anything with you as a child, as a teenager, but when you become an adult, when you turn 18, you are property of SHIELD.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the aesthetic they're going with in Far From Home, as near as I can tell. That essentially, sort of Nick Fury, quote unquote, hijacks his summer vacation, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, well, there's some connective tissue for us to play off of.
The creative team in this comic, I already mentioned, we're talking Brian Michael Bendis. Also, the pencils by Mark Bagley. Okay, it's Mark, right? That's the first. Now, I'm looking for the first name because for some reason I'm thinking it's something different, but it's not.
It's Mark.
Okay, Mark Bagley. All right, which he's been a rather prominent Spider-Man artist since like the 90s, right?
Yeah, definitive Spider-Man artist to my mind.
Yeah.
Huge, amazing Spider-Man run and through the 90s. Before he started doing Ultimate Spider-Man.
Jesse, I have a question for you, a serious question, not about
shipping, erotica,
or shipping.
That's good.
if you could stop talking about that for just a second, you weirdo. Boy, don't you miss Ronnie Adams? Do you keep a spreadsheet on the stories and the writers and the artists that we do here on the Source Material podcast?
No.
Serious question.
I have one, sort of. It's just not up to date. How's that?
I would like you to answer me. Clear as mud. I would like for you to answer me with a yes or no question. Jesse says maybe. Definitely maybe.
Definitely, sort of.
My further question, the reason why I'm asking this is, how many Michael Bendis books have we done? Because last week it was Jessica Jones. This week it's Spider-Man. We've done
Secret Invasion a few weeks ago.
Yep. Civil War 2.
Yeah, I feel like we do a shit ton of Bendis. And
if you're doing anything from Marvel in the 2000s, there's a good shot Bendis did it.
Yeah.
Well, that was my question, and that's where I was going with this. Is it that we just seem to gravitate towards his writing, or is that if you threw a dart, you hit a Bendis book?
Well, in your particular case, I mean, did the writer even pop up in your search, or did you just look? You were just looking for Nick Fury and Spider-Man. So,
yeah.
But yeah, as far as I know, I mean, I know I was thinking about this earlier. I believe that he is probably the most covered the most covered writer on the show. So far, I know for a while we were doing Brian K. Vaughan. We had a lot of Brian K. Vaughan books on here, and I thought at one point he led, but I'm pretty sure Bendis has taken over now because we've talked. Not only have we talked that, I swear we even did a news story on him. Remember when he jumped from Marvel to DC? That was actually one of the
Breaking Michael Bendis.
Yeah, yes, it was.
It was a weirdly titled podcast. I wasn't quite sure what you guys were talking about.
Breaking
That
Brian
was a big deal.
It was too, and he's currently writing Superman for DC. At least, I still think he is, and he's getting his hands on the Legion, which is a big deal to a lot of people. I'm not a Legion guy. I don't know much about the Legion of Superheroes. So,
what's the most covered artist we do on here? Is it Salami Keith?
No, fucking hate you. Hate you so bad.
Love you.
Most covered, the most talked about artist on here. Ooh, I don't know. Again, that would be something where if I had a spreadsheet that was completed, I'd definitely know.
Before the next show, will you please complete a spreadsheet?
Jeez. I could give it a shot. I mean, it seriously takes me about 10, 15 minutes to do.
You're a fucking government worker. You have July 4th off. There's your task.
Fuck you, man. All right.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Wait, that was last week. Time travel.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the Ultimate line of comics real quick. I wrote down a little bit of a blurb from the wiki just to kind of give an idea to people who don't know what the Ultimate line of Marvel Comics actually was. It's, I believe, Earth. Oh my goodness, I had it written down here. It's actually, we have the Earth 616, which is the Marvel continuity proper. And then we have the Ultimate Marvel Universe, where things are done a little bit differently. So here, I'll read this to you. The idea for the Ultimate imprint was developed by Bill Jamath, which is a name I never heard, but it's an interesting story. A lawyer who had worked mainly at the collectible trading card industry before that point, he had little interaction with the production of comic books. In his perspective, the main problem of Marvel Comics was that it was publishing stories that were all but impossible for teens to read and unaffordable to boot. He worked on an idea given by a CEO of the Wizard magazine, reboot the heroes to the original character premise. Marvel's editor-in-chief Joe Quesada preferred to start an imprint with new heroes, but accepted Jamasa's proposal. The working title for the imprint at that point was Ground Zero. Unlike previous reboots, there was no in-story explanation for the existing of the imprint, and the standard comic books were still being published, unaffected by the new project. Thus, Ultimate Spider-Man would continue the stories of a new teenage Spider-Man starting his career, and the usual Spider-Man titles would still contain the stories of the adult Spider-Man with nearly 40 years of continuity. So think of you just imagine you got a whole different line, which I thought was kind of odd at the time, but it really took fire. It caught fire. And Brian Michael Bendis,
a big deal.
Yeah, Brian Michael Bendis, come at Spider-Man and did a great job and got a lot of eyes on the Ultimate line, and thus it spawned the Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates. So there was quite a bit of, I guess, newer versions and newer takes on Marvel superheroes in this Ultimate line of comics.
Would this be parallel, not in timeline, but parallel in nature to the New 52?
Because the New 52 took over as the main continuity of all the DC line, whereas Ultimate sat on its own, separate from the Marvel line, which continued on as it had been.
I think that was the detail that I was missing in all of this, is that basically somebody said, you're confusing the fuck out of your readers. Why don't you just start over again? And they said, we'll start over again, but keep doing the same thing.
Exactly.
And then that lawyer threw himself out a fucking window.
Chris is exactly right. This is a completely separate continuity, but was still going on at the same time. And when the Secret Wars happened, I won't get into all that. Mark, you remember covering Secret Wars?
The pizza.
That's right. All right. So
this is the universe that Miles Morales was invented in?
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is the pizza. This is the other side of the pizza that collided with the 616.
This is part of the other parts of the pizza that collided with the 616, because we had a ton of other different continuities that happened during Secret Wars. There was, like the Old Man Logan continuity. All that stuff was going on at once, and it got all brought into Secret Wars. And then, of course, they just took elements from all these different continuities and different alternate
people we like.
There you go. Yeah.
So I got a question for Chris, who's our resident know-it-all on this particular panel. You'd have to be, because Jesse reads from the wiki and I know nothing. So, so Chris, my friend.
Yes.
Can you tell me, before Secret Wars, how many, let's not use the word continuities because I think that's a bit in the weeds. Let's say comic lines, if you catch my drift. You with me so far? How many individual comic lines, comic timelines existed going into Secret Wars? We know there was the 616. Obviously, there was the Ultimates. What else was there? And how many were there?
There's no way I could never even guess, because they could take a what if issue from the 80s. That's Earth 479.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just countless. Every Elseworld style Marvel story is its own alternate universe.
Were they running at that time?
No, because those would be one-offs. As far as
that's what I'm saying.
That ran for multiple issues.
Yeah,
pretty much just the ultimate line. There was for example, Old Man Logan was a 12, maybe an 8-issue story that ran in Wolverine. It's been retroactively, it's become an alternate universe because it's an alternate future. Same thing with Hulk's Future Imperfect was a 2-issue story. It's set in the future, so it's kind of its own thing, but it's not a separate line of comics.
But yeah, I think what you're saying there, Mark, is as for what was publishing at the same time that Secret Wars happened, I honestly think it was only these two lines. I mean, the Ultimate line of comics was the longest run alternate Marvel universe. I don't think there ever was another one, unless you're going to count What Ifs.
Wasn't there the heroic age or some shit?
I don't think that was a different.
That was just a banner that all the Marvel books ran under for a little while after Siege, I think.
Okay.
But it wasn't its own line of comics. Kind of want to rant a little bit about the Ultimate line before we dig into these actual issues.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I was reading these comics, when they came out, and when they announced Ultimate Spider-Man, it came about a year, maybe 2 years after a book called Spider-Man Chapter 1 that John Byrne did.
Okay.
Which was kind of a bomb. It was supposed to be a modern retelling of Peter Parker's origin in the first year of Peter Parker's or of Spider-Man's career.
Okay.
He made some changes here and there, but he basically retold all the stories from the early days of Spider-Man, and it kind of landed with a thud. And then about a year later, they did this, and I was like, this is the same thing John Byrne just did, and everybody hated it. So I didn't know what the deal was.
I didn't even ever hear of that John Byrne.
Yeah, I think it's called Spider-Man Chapter 1. It's
Okay.
a 12-issue series. I bought Ultimate Spider-Man #1 because Bagley was the artist, and I was like, I'm not going to not buy a Spider-Man book by Mark Bagley.
Yeah.
And Bendis had gained some notoriety for like Powers, an Image book. I think it might have been Oni Press at the time. He had done Sam and Twitch and some graphic novels, crime novels. So this was kind of his first foray into mainstream superhero comics, and it was a huge hit. Ultimate X-Men was also a pretty big hit. It was Mark Millar, who hadn't really done a whole lot. I think he had done The Authority, maybe, for Wildstorm. So it became a huge deal, and the Ultimate line was better than the Marvel line for several years. Ultimate Fantastic Four was also a pretty good Ultimate book. But
introducing the Marvel Zombies at one point, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Yeah, Marvel Zombies had their origin there, but eventually it kind of collapsed under the weight of its own continuity, the way every other comic line is going to do. And by the end, it became really just terrible. I kind of stopped reading everything except for Ultimate Spider-Man by like 2004, 2005, somewhere in there, around the time Ultimatum happened, which was famously a terrible Ultimate Comics storyline.
So yeah, Mark. There's a lot, and it seemed like the alternate stories that they were telling in the Ultimates were a little bit more extreme, especially with the Ultimates. I remember specifically reading the Ultimates issues, and just how over the top their take on the Avengers were, and some of the extreme stuff that was happening in those pages. I can't remember who was writing it for the life of me.
That was Mark Millar as well.
Was it Miller? Okay. Yeah. Didn't Miller write Old Man Logan, or who was that?
He did. I'm pretty sure he did, yeah.
All right. So,
Miller is really good when he's working under the constraints of like an editorial system, like Old Man Logan, the Ultimates. A lot of that stuff's really good. I haven't liked any of his creator-owned stuff in a long time.
Okay. Well, all right. Before we get into the reason why we came here, you boys did some homework, some extra credit. So, Mark, we're going to start with you, and then Chris, your job will be to clean up there and just pitch in whatever you feel Mark is missing or whatever you want to get off your chest. So, bring me up to speed, Mark Radulich. Issues 1 through 21 of Ultimate Spider-Man. What's going on?
Well, as we've talked about already, this is a retelling of the Spider-Man origin from day one. It just happened in the year 2000, so the technology is a little bit different. The characterizations are somewhat altered. The funniest one, in my opinion, is Gwen Stacy. God, when she shows up, it's fucking hilarious to me. It's, Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider. Okay, this case, it was a genetically engineered spider that Oscorp Industries was working on. The power set is the same. He's able to stick to walls. He has, if I remember correctly, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, he has spider sense. This is not an iteration where he organically shoots webs out of his wrist.
That was going to be my next question. My next question was exactly that.
He has to build web shooters. He does wrestling, and in this case, it's not because he wants a car, because he wants to impress babes. It's because he got into a fight with Flash Thompson. He caught Flash Thompson's hand and broke his wrist. So Flash Thompson's parents are suing the Parkers, who are also poor in this iteration, just getting by. So he has to make money to help support them and to, help with this lawsuit. So he's wrestling for a little bit, and that goes on for a while. The change here in the death of Uncle Ben, there's a mugging that happens at a deli. Spider-Man just lets him go, similar to what happened in the 60s comic. 60s, 50s, somewhere in there. 60s. That same, I forget the details on this, but basically it's a similar issue. The guy that he lets get away ends up killing Uncle Ben. In school, the new character in school, one of the bullies, is a guy named Kong, who kind of looks like the Blob.
Really?
Yeah, he's a big dude. He comes a bit Spider-Man obsessed. Him and Peter are actually friends for a little bit, here and there. Flash is always a douchebag. And in this iteration, Mary Jane has been in love with Peter since like day one. And she's like actively kind of pursuing him. moving along with the story. So this explosion happens at Oscorp after the whole spider bite incident, which causes Norman Osborn to turn into a Hulk-like version of the Green Goblin. So instead of a crazy dude in a mask or a crazy dude in body armor, whichever iteration of this you like, picture if the Hulk and the Abomination had a baby with a golem. That's kind of what he looks like. And he's a lunatic and all of that, and he attacks the school, and Harry, who's also friends with Peter, has to go away for a while, and the Green Goblin kind of disappears. The wrestling gig doesn't pan out, and Peter ends up becoming the web guy for the Daily Bugle. A little bit different than starts with photographs, but what he ends up becoming the website person for the Daily Bugle, and a really funny bit of comic writing. I thought that was really hilarious how that happens. Now Peter's working for the Bugle. He's kind of dating Mary Jane. He's being Spider-Man, and this opens up the storyline with the Kingpin, which I think is like mildly connected to the guy that shot Uncle Ben, if I remember correctly. Peter kind of actively pursues the Kingpin. The Electro and some of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery works for the Kingpin. That's how they're all connected. Spider-Man goes after the Kingpin for a number of issues, which ends with the Kingpin having to leave the country for a while the heat's on him. But this also involves, just like the old comic did, the press is skewing the story against Spider-Man to where he's the menace. Eventually, this will right itself, and they'll see Spider-Man for who he is for the most part. But there's a long series of issues where Peter is trying to figure out how to be a superhero and not be hated by the press, and it's not working out, and he's very frustrated. I think he comes close to quitting at one point. All right, so moving on. He eventually tells Mary Jane because it becomes impossible to not tell her and maintain a relationship. So she knows his origin. He doesn't, in the issues that I read, he never told Aunt May, though Aunt May, because he's out late one night, like 3 o'clock in the morning, freaks out on him, and he has to kind of tone things down for a bit. They introduced Kraven the Hunter, who is essentially, what was the Australian guy's name?
The Crocodile Hunter, basically.
Yeah,
Steve Irwin.
Yeah, Kraven the Hunter is essentially Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter, who's coming to New York to hunt Spider-Man as a ratings ploy, which is really funny.
Oh, jeez.
Around that time, one of the scientists who was actually like a double agent for Hammer Industries, Dr. Octopus, same iteration kind of as what happened in the Spider-Man 2 movie. There's an accident during the accident that caused the Green Goblin to come into existence. He ends up with the tentacle arms that he uses as a tool, end up being fused to his body, and he goes plumb loco. So in the middle of the whole Kraven thing, Spider-Man's also fighting Dr. Octopus, who ends up being taken by S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's how Spider-Man gets involved with Nick Fury. Takes care of Kraven in like one punch. And I think that's everything. Chris, did I miss anything big?
Okay.
I did like in the first issue, which Mark kind of referenced, it's a retelling of the origin, but there's a little caption box in, I think on the first page, that says that it based on the original story in Amazing Fantasy number 15 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, which is kind of telling people this is an updated version of the first Spider-Man story. Like, this is the original. And in classic Bendis style, he took a 12-page story and turned it into 6 issues.
The one thing I know because I mentioned it before, the introduction of Gwen Stacy. Now, in the comic, I believe, I don't know if Gwen Stacy's dad was a police officer or anything like that in the original iteration.
He was.
Okay, what I remember her being famous for was being thrown out of a window.
Thrown off a bridge.
Yeah, either way. But, at that time, I think Mary Jane was dating either somebody else, and Peter was dating Gwen, and it was a big part of his hero's arc.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, like I said, Peter and Mary Jane are kind of a thing through all 20 issues that I read. They introduced Gwen in the latter half. She's like the new kid in town, and she comes in like Daria. She's like, life. What is this life? Life is darkness. And it's like, what the fuck?
Well, I noticed she's got like a little bit of a stint in these issues we're going to talk about, but not very, it's not a very large. She obviously gets to know Peter a little bit, but that's about it. I didn't know she was actually. I thought she was introduced in these issues, so it was before this that she shows up.
She's a very female forward character. Yeah, I was just about to say she's a very female forward character. She's not a do nothing. She's not a damsel in distress. She fucking almost knifes Kong in like the first appearance.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, she has a real like preacher's daughter vibe, almost like the rebellious teenage girl vibe in her early appearances here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, they've got her and Peter have kind of a Forrest and Jenny thing going on.
I liked the new version of Dr. Octopus outside of the fact that Bagley had him ripped up like, a superhero, whereas I prefer Doc Ock to be kind of dumpy.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But it's a very visually very cool looking character. And he's I think a lot of the Spider-Man 2 and the Sam Raimi film, I think a lot of his presentation here made its way into that movie where he's kind of driven crazy by the accident that happens. I think in the original continuity, that wasn't really a thing. He was just a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice a lot of the character designs are super dated now. When this came out, they were trying to make it look modern, and this is the Marvel for the 2000s. But Flash has a Caesar haircut. Peter's got kind of a late 90s style haircut, and a lot of guys have soul patches and little like pointy goatees and stuff, which is really distracting looking back at it now. It doesn't affect how good the story is at all. And I'm a huge Bagley fan, so I'm not dissing him. I think that was just something they were trying to do to appeal to
update it.
People who didn't read comics.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job with if you needed a starting point for Spider-Man, you didn't want to pick up issue 406. I thought this captures, I thought this captured kind of the essence of Spider-Man. But, I think for young readers, modern readers who might struggle with, Christ, we're all in our like 30s and 40s and fucking we struggle with some of the Jack Kirby stuff. I think this is, you get the essence of it without it being too dense. Like this is light reading.
Just with the issues that I read, there were a couple parts where it was, all right, here we go. There's going to be a huge amount of text or a huge amount of dialogue. And then the next like 5-6 pages are no words are being said. It's just all action. I was like, okay, I can handle this. I don't mind taking that pause for the cause to try and catch up and read some explanation or exposition or whatever. And then we get the action. I like that. That's very 90s to me, in my opinion. Let's get into the synopsis of 22. I'm going to do the synopsis today. I'm not going to post-edit it and then not post-edit it. So here we go. Issues 22 through 27 of Ultimate Spider-Man. This is, what was the name of this graphic novel again, Mark? Volume 4? Legacy. All right. Norman Osborn is back. Last seen in the pages of Ultimate Spider-Man when he was using his experimental drug called Oz to become the Green Goblin and battling Spider-Man, but getting gravely injured and dropping into a river and disappearing. Now, as the Green Goblin plans on making Peter Parker's life a living hell, knowing his identity, he reveals to Peter Parker that he plans to hurt or kill those he loves unless he follows his words. At the end of his rope and nowhere to run, Peter is approached by Nick Fury, who tells Peter that he knows everything, his secret identity, the trouble with Norman Osborn, and that he plans to help out, but only when Osborn makes a move to threaten a civilian. Peter is not happy and actually goes to confront the Green Goblin, telling him he is never going to do what he says and is not scared of him. Infuriated, the Green Goblin abducts Mary Jane and takes her to the top of a bridge and tosses her off. Spider-Man is able to save her just before she hits the water and then turns his attention back to Green Goblin.
Unlike Spectacular Spider-Man 2, doesn't kill her, or Amazing Spider-Man, whatever the hell the name of the movie was.
That's correct. Heading back to his
one
penthouse.
Good part of the movie.
It was the most faithful to the source material. Heading back to his penthouse to get more Oz, Spidey and Green Goblin battle, during which Norman's son Harry shows up and has to kill his own father before he kills Peter. Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. clean up the mess, but not before leaving Peter Parker with a message regarding involving loved ones when he shouldn't, and just what will happen once Peter becomes an adult. So there you go. Now, I left that pretty vague because there's quite a few things we could talk about here. Mark, I'll start with you. I mean, you already talked about the Green Goblin. What do you think of this iteration of the Green Goblin compared to what we have in the normal 616?
I wasn't like super thrilled with the look of it. I was like, oh, Jesus, they made him a monster. Whatever. But I liked this better than his original. the original issues that he's in at the beginning of the series, him basically telling, I own you. And, he comes off extremely menacing in these issues. Like he's really scary. What I liked about Legacy in general was this feeling of Peter being in a rock and a hard place, in the sense that no matter where he turned, no matter what was happening, he had very little to no choice. Goblin was basically like, if you don't do what I say, I'll kill everyone that you know. And Nick Fury is like, if you don't do what I say, we're going to throw you in jail, basically, because you're a superhero and we own you. And it's like, this poor kid was the victim of an accident. He's not Captain America. He didn't volunteer for this. He's not Iron Man. He didn't build himself a suit. He's a kid who on a field trip got bitten by a science project gone awry. I just finished watching Cloak and Dagger today, and one of the characters goes, no, I don't want any part of this. I want to go to medical school. I want to be a doctor. And her aunt goes, spoilers, and her aunt goes, yeah, that's just you being selfish. You're turning away from your destiny. And that's heavy stuff. You have this kid, Peter, who 20 minutes ago was like, I'm just a dork in the world, and I'm going to go do science in college and work for a company and hopefully not commit suicide in my 30s. And suddenly he's the most hated guy on TV, and he's got all these powers. And it's like, you really get a sense of him taking stock of his situation and going, what has happened to me? Where did I lose control over all of this? So to get back to your initial question about the Goblin, I think the Goblin is really great at bringing that out of Peter and kind of pushing him to his breaking point. And actually, so is Nick Fury. I think he's being tugged in two directions that he wants nothing to do with. And I thought this is some pretty sharp writing for something that up to that point I thought was kind of on the kiddie side.
When I was reading the series originally, going back almost 20 years now, sadly, as I stare into the void.
And it looks back at you.
I was pretty disappointed with the Goblin just being basically a hulking monster. I thought it was too big of a departure from the Osborn in 616 continuity, he has some powers, but he's mostly just wearing a goblin outfit, and he has, pumpkin bombs and laser blasters on his fingers, stuff like that. But it is a new universe, a new version, so I kind of let it slide. I don't have like a huge problem with it, but even now I'm still a little disappointed with the way they represented Green Goblin. As far as the character stuff, everything Mark said, I pretty much agree with. He's very menacing. He's very matter of fact when he interacts with Peter. Like, I own you now. This. I'm just laying out the facts. Like, there's no debate. There's no argument. This isn't me asking questions or asking what you think. I'm just telling you this is how it's going to be. And he like 100% believes that whatever he tells Peter's going to go along with, because he thinks he does.
He's got him under his thumb. One of the things I really thought was, it was an interesting way to do the comic. When Peter goes to confront Green Goblin, he finds him on the rooftop, and they're having their yelling match. Finally, after it's all said and done, I think the Green Goblin leaves, and that's when he goes and grabs Mary Jane. But the next issue happens, because at that time, Mary Jane gets swept off her feet, and it's to be continued. And then the next issue happens. You see that same conversation going on, except it's from Norman Osborn's take.
All right, I'm not gonna lie, I sped read through that. I'm like, I don't need to. That works in a visual format. It doesn't work for me in a written format.
Well, you don't have to read everything because you read most of it, but the rest, you got a good understanding of his madness. He has these voices that are coming out of him, and they're saying all these different things. At first, I was like, none of this makes sense. None of it made sense, and I was like, well, yeah, he's a madman. That's why. So I guess that does make sense after all. But I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jesse. I'd completely forgotten about that because, it's been forever since I've read this. And I also kind of sped read at least all the Peter stuff. And a lot of the stuff in the Goblins thought balloons or whatever, it's all kind of the same stuff repeated over and over, just rambling stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a really effective showing you his mindset. Also, the way he sees Peter, like he's got spider legs coming out of his sides. He's got like his eyes are separated into like spider eyes, like hundreds of eyes.
He's even got mouth parts, like stuff coming out of the chin. Right. It's nasty. But again, it's neat because they take that same conversation when you read it before, and he's just kind of speaking out of turn, and some of the stuff he's saying is not making sense. But then when you read that next issue, you're like, oh, okay, well that's why he said that. The circles, circles, circles. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, for me, I mean, I can't really say much different than what you guys have already said. I think it's an interesting take on the Green Goblin. He's got to inject himself with the Oz formula, and then he becomes like this hulking beast. Which, I'll take it or leave it. I'll take villains any way I can get them. So, I mean, let's talk Mary Jane here. I had a few. Obviously, the Mary Jane / Gwen Stacy spot where they traded her out after she got thrown off the bridge. Mark, what'd you think when you were reading? I mean, were you like, oh, geez, here we go again? Or what was your thoughts there with MJ getting thrown off by the Goblin?
What I thought about the entire series, which was that they saw the Sam Raimi Spider-Man and was like, when did those come out, by the way?
You are backwards, sir. These came out.
I was going to say
the
first movie came out the same month the first issue of this storyline was released, May of 2002.
So on sale date of this particular set of books was the first issue 22 was May 1st, 2002.
So that would have been the week before. That was probably like a big deal. They thought, well, this movie's going to draw people into these comics. And this was the storyline they were going to be reading to coincide with the Green Goblin, the villain in the movie and whatnot.
Interesting. All right, go ahead, Mark.
Very similar, like Mark said, a very similar climax to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, clearly they might have been, in synchronicity, but they were obviously not related. Production and script for a movie is well before any of these comics came out. So what did I think when I saw it? I mean, I'm fine with it. The heat was on Mary Jane, almost the entire thing. Gwen Stacy gets kind of brought in midway through to complicate that relationship. Mm-hmm. All right. So if you got your bingo cards out, this is wrestling parlance. Mark the sentence. One of the arcs for Peter is dealing with Mary Jane, and Gwen Stacy's role is to be disruptive in that. She, so to have switched trains suddenly and just so she is the right person to be thrown off a bridge wouldn't have made any sense to me. I was fine with it.
Okay. Gwen Stacy was Pete's first love interest, right? Chris?
Right.
Is that right? So
right. Yeah, Mary Jane didn't come into continuity until the 70s. I think Peter was in college already.
Okay.
And I think Gwen was already established at that point.
Okay. All right. Did you have any feelings on, the MJ spot?
I thought it was pretty well done, especially this 2-page spread of the several vertical thin panels of showing Pete jumping off the battle with the helicopters and the Green Goblin. He's racing down to try and save her. Really cool visual, him catching her with the webs. I remember even back when this was released, it ends with Peter holding MJ. It looks like she's dead. Mm-hmm. Most of the readers are remembering, oh, this is like Gwen Stacy when she died. And then, a month later we see, oh, she's not dead. She's still alive. It's cool. Which is kind of I wouldn't say a trick, but it's kind of lame.
What was it called?
Cock-a-doodie car.
Oh,
but outside of that, it's no surprise that it's one of the most iconic Spider-Man moments. It's no surprise they're going to use that in Ultimate Spider-Man, and it was well done. I just thought it was kind of a lame gotcha moment where they're like, "Oh yeah, she's dead," and then no, she was just unconscious. It's cool.
Shield's role in this whole thing and Nick Fury's role in this whole thing, he shows up and says, "Hey, we know about you, we know about the Green Goblin, we know what's going on, but we really can't make a move."
Well, I mean, it made sense. They're saying we have evidence, but it was collected illegally, so we can't use it. I mean, this is the great frustration. Mark your corner right square. I'm going to reference The Wire.
Greatest TV series of all time.
Yeah, that man knows. He's a smart cat. But that was one of the frustrations with the inherent in the writing with the Wire show. You have these guys like dead to rights, but if you don't have evidence that'll hold up in court, you don't have anything. So you can arrest people all day. And we talk about this at my job. I work in the county jail, and people are a little confused with how the law works. They were like, "How could they arrest you? You can get arrested for just about anything." Okay, they don't need evidence to arrest somebody. They just need suspicion. I think there's a little more to it than that, but that's basically it. I've often talked about the funniest thing I've ever seen in my 10-year career in as a law enforcement social worker are the people who get arrested and their only charge is resisting without violence.
Right.
So it doesn't take much. However, convictions take evidence. That evidence has to stand up in court unless you take a plea deal of some kind. Therein lies the problem with the Green Goblin, is that they have all of this surveillance, but it's illegal surveillance. That's kind of what S.H.I.E.L.D. does. So what he's telling Peter is, in order for this to work, in order for us to appropriately prosecute this character, we need to catch him in the act, and we need to have that evidence be able to stand up in trial. And Peter's like a science person, but he's no legal scholar. And he's just like, I'm not willing to dangle my friends and family as bait so that you can catch this guy. And he was like, well, you're going to have to, because that's how the law works.
Peter's a dumb kid. He doesn't know any difference. I'm calling bullshit. Nick Fury, you're a black ops government official. Since when the fuck do you care about what's legal? Like, just throw him in a hole somewhere.
You know, I was thinking the same thing, because, I mean, Peter asked him, like, can't you go shoot him? Can't you do something? He's like, oh, it don't work like that. And I'm like, bullshit, man.
Right.
Well, what I find funny about that, and it's funny you mentioned that, Chris, because I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm explaining this in context of what's said in the comic, but if you ask my opinion on it, it's like, you have the raft.
You know, like if that's a district attorney saying that, sure, I get it.
Yeah, I was just taking a look here. Our ultimate Nick Fury, by the way, Mark Radulich, I'm sure you could tell where they've got the inspiration for the Nick Fury that plays in the Marvel Cinematic U here. Ultimate Nick Fury was actually created by Brian Michael Bendis and Mike Allred. So, very interesting. Now, his first appearance was Ultimate Marvel Team Up number 5, which came out August of 2001. But, Mark, were you reading Nick Fury with Samuel L. Jackson's voice in mind?
Yes.
How can you not?
How can you?
I had "Bitch, you've been to space" going in, in my head the entire time.
The first, I don't remember that Ultimate Team Up issue I'm sure that's accurate, but I remember before Ultimates came out and we had Black Nick Fury, there was a white Nick Fury in Ultimate X-Men. And there was an issue of that where a Nick Fury character showed up and it was a white guy.
Oh, really?
I don't remember the team up issue. Like, he was probably white in that too, but I don't know for certain.
Well, isn't like, obviously this is a different universe, but didn't they say at some point that he was supposedly the son of Nick Fury?
That's in Marvel continuity now.
Okay.
There's a new Nick Fury that looks like this Nick Fury, and he's Nick Fury Jr., essentially. He's got an eye patch. They just wanted him to look like the movies, basically.
Coming this fall to Fox, My Black Son, starring Nick Fury.
I'm telling you, they pander so much to the movies, but they just want, we've talked about this already, they just want
I'm
something.
just glad they made him a separate character instead of just like magically replacing him.
Yeah, like there's questions here. What questions? What do you mean? Life model decoys? Well,
actually, no, I disagree. I would have loved to have seen a panel where Black Nick Fury walks into a panel with White Nick Fury and says, "You've been replaced, but why? Quotas. All right," and he just walks off screen.
Boo! That's funny. All right. Well,
he's better represented, I think, in the Ultimates storyline. Well, I shouldn't even say better represented. He's more of a factor in those storylines, but he does show up periodically even after this in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic line. And there's some really interesting stuff that I won't spoil for you guys if you. Because I'm sure you'll eventually read them, that comes into play with him later in the Ultimate Universe.
Let's get our final thoughts here on Legacy, Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 4. Mark Radulich, what's your final thoughts here, man? You, sir, went above and beyond the Call of Duty here. Started with Volume 1, got all the way up to the end of Volume 4. I assume you stopped here. You didn't go any further?
No. Yeah, okay. I stopped at 27. I tried to pick stuff for the Source Material podcast that we don't need a lot of book ending for, that we can, sometimes it's impossible. The Kree-Skrull War comes to mind. That still gives me nosebleeds, by the way. I try to pick a lot of self-contained stuff because we're not going in any particular order. We're not like some of these other podcasts, which we love, not complaining, but a lot of them kind of do a run of something. We pick a story. And so it's hard to just jump into a story and then jump out into the next one. So with this, I was like, okay, 27 issues. I'm not going to make Jesse read all of those because he's got shit to do.
Thank goodness.
He's got to do drunk editing. So he's busy drinking. So
I wish.
But I've got some time on a Sunday right now, so I'll get through them and I'll have a better understanding of what it is I'm reading once we get there. But I picked this because of the relationship between Nick Fury and Spider-Man, and I thought that was the most interesting part of the story. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this run. Bendis is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, he's no Tom King.
No, boy. Well,
but I think Bendis gives. I don't know. Am I wrong about that? Does Bendis give some people fits?
we've had some people on the podcast that were not, they weren't very impressed with how Bendis handled some things. And
I'm a big fan of Bendis pre-2007 or so.
Yeah.
Ever since then, he's kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
I would say he's gone a little crazy. But I like this. I've enjoyed most of the Bendis stuff we've read so far, and I'm anxious to do more of it. I'm sure we have. Apparently, every time I pick something, I'm like, oh, it's fucking Bendis again. I actually want to do Bendis' run on Superman once the trades start popping out.
Yeah, there'll be
room. There'll be room on the calendar in 2022.
I've been hearing drips and drabs or bits and bobs of what's been happening over there. I haven't read anything, but there's
the art is really good.
What's that? The art?
The art is really good.
Have you not been impressed with the story?
I haven't disliked it necessarily, but I'm not it's not blowing my socks off or anything either.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've heard some of the stuff that's been going on over there, which, but again, we'll see. Yeah, 2022. Put it on the calendar. Final thoughts there, Chris Armstrong, on Legacy and what you've read so far with Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Spider-Man is not like one of my favorite superheroes as far as like if I did like a top 5, he wouldn't probably be in there. But I've been a consistent Spider-Man reader for 25 years or whatever. And Ultimate Spider-Man, especially the early run, is among the best. Like it's Bendis, for all the complaints I have about him and some of his other stuff, he really nails like the dialogue between like teenagers. The decompressed storytelling works really well with this because he's focusing just on Peter and the very small group around him, basically. The art, I'm a huge fan of Bagley, as I've already said, and something that I may not have noticed if I hadn't been reading. I've been rereading Thunderbolts right before I started jumping back into this, which is a book he worked on for a long time, probably right before this, I would think. And I noticed that his art style changed quite a bit, and like you can still tell it's him.
Yeah.
In Ultimate Spider-Man, everything's a lot more character driven. Like there's a lot more close-ups. Facial expressions are a big deal. He almost is like doing caricatures of certain characters. Like Kingpin is a gigantic mass. Peter, as Spider-Man, he's lanky and skinny and small, but his hands are really big. His eyes are really big.
So photorealistic, yeah?
Sorry?
So photorealistic, yeah?
Don't know about that one.
I wouldn't put it that way. It's almost cartoonish, but like not quite. There's also a lot of, I think, something that was popular around this time that the Ultimate line may have kind of pioneered. They don't really do it as much anymore, I don't think, but like the computer coloring, there's a lot of like clearly in the artwork. I think works okay. I'm kind of glad they've shied away from doing it more in recent years.
It's really obvious back here in this era. It's really, really obvious. I think I picked that out. I can't remember which issue, but it was like there was like this blur, and I was like, okay, that was clearly, that was digital. Right. They digitized that somehow. But
that's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Ultimate Spider-Man run. I thought it lost steam quite a bit towards the end. It went 130-something issues, I think, before eventually Miles Morales became Spider-Man or whatever. But if you're looking for somebody that's not that familiar with Spider-Man comics, this is definitely what you want to point them to, I think.
Yeah.
I think, when my son is able to read and I start forcing him to read comic books against his will, like I've done my daughter, I'm probably going to hip him to this.
This is definitely a good starting point. I enjoyed myself. I had a good time reading Legacy. I haven't really had much of a problem with Bendis. I think Civil War II was probably one of the books where we could kind of point out his type of storytelling didn't work. Loved him in Jessica Jones. I love him right here in Ultimate Spider-Man. I had a good time reading it. So this, I guess, will bring our coverage to a close of Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 4, issues 22 through 27. Legacy. All right, Mark Radulich, we're going to come to you second here. Cue him up, shut him down. Let's talk to Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong, give us some plugs here, sir.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at BrodyMan34. Also, check out theunspokendecade.com. It's a 90s comic fan site I contributed to a few times, and they do a lot of great stuff on those great 90s comics that everybody loves.
All right, Mark. Schedule, sir. What do we got coming up?
Oh, boy. Next week, right here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. Actually, let me start with this week. Tomorrow, Damn You Hollywood, Spider-Man Far From Home. Wednesday, July 10th, we have Amon Amoth Berserker. We were supposed to do that 2 weeks ago, but we didn't have Robert Cooper, and this is one of his favorite bands, so we just put it off. We rearranged some things. You can go back in the archives and check out our previous 2 shows. This is Upon a Burning Body, Southern Hostility, and Glory Hammer. I'd like to show you my Glory Hammer, but you're going to have to stand far back.
Oh, no. Oh, my. Oh.
And Thursday, if Sean can get himself together, we'll do an on-trial for Spider-Man 3. We were going to do one for Amazing Spider-Man 2, but we've already done it, and I forgot. Oops.
Are you defending, sir?
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
The following week, it's Doom Patrol. We're finally getting around to that. I know the series, the first season ended a little ways back. We're getting to it this week because there's not a whole lot else going on. So source material, we'll be doing the 2016 iteration of Doom Patrol, Volume 1, Brick by Brick is what they call it. I will probably not be on Damn You Hollywood, but they'll be review. But Alexis Hana, Robert Winfrey, and Jason Teasley, the prodigal son, has returned, and they'll be reviewing Crawl because alligators, hurricanes, and Florida. Hot damn. Metal Hammer of Doom, July 17th, the Texas Hippie Coalition, baby. Woo. And Jesse Starcher, come sit on my lap. Let's talk some Doom Patrol. How do you like it?
I'll sit over here in this chair.
You'll sit where I tell you.
No. No, sir.
We might have me and CB3, as we're calling him, otherwise known as Chris Bailey. And I might review some Extreme Rules for you. We'll see what happens. I haven't heard back and see if we're doing that. In the meantime, if you want to hear some of our other wrestling coverage, we made a new friend, believe it or not. Someone listened to our podcast and once again wanted to be on it. Nobody knows why. But we reviewed myself, Chris Bailey, and our new friend, TMC, who writes wrestling reviews. We reviewed AEW Fyter Fest, otherwise known as AEW Cody's Got a Hole in His Head. The following week, it's all Cloak and Dagger some of the time. On the Source Material podcast, we got Cloak and Dagger, Shades of Grey, the 2008 iteration, issues 1 through 6. We've got The Lion King, Damn You Hollywood. We've got Sabaton, The Great War. And then Jesse Starcher's back on my lap. We're going to talk some Cloak and Dagger Season 2. That's a weird fucking show, my man.
Is it getting weird? We've got through 3 episodes so far, so I think 2 or 3.
Well, Hulu said that if I didn't watch all of it today, it was going to expire and I wouldn't have access to it. So I binge watched the whole thing in the last 2 days. And yeah, that's a weird show.
What do you mean it's going to expire? Is it one of those things where it goes away after so many episodes show up?
I guess, yeah. Go check your Hulu.
Well, looks like I'm putting the old eye patch on and yelling "yar" if I have any problems. Jeez.
And then we close out July, or as I like to call it, Dr. Jail. We'll be talking DC Hanna-Barbera 3. It'll be myself, Alexis, maybe Ronnie, maybe not, who the fuck knows, and of course Jesse, maybe even my dad. Maybe we get my father-in-law to come on here. He don't read comics. He don't give a shit. But
what am I doing here? No idea, sir.
Brian, I need you to judge something. Judge nothing. Get out of my house. We'll be reviewing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We'll be reviewing L7 Scatter the Rats on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then we kick off August with an on-trial for Pulp Fiction. You can also check out Jesse and I discussing The Secrets of Maria Hill, the last Volume 2 of the Jessica Jones, Michael Bendis iteration. The Secret of Maria Hill is she can pee standing up. Check it out. Robert Winfrey and I reviewed Jessica Jones Season 3, the last of the Red Hot Netflix shows. And finally, Jesse and I, as I said before, we reviewed the new Glory Hammer. So
Glory Hammer.
Oh, hoot sweet. So that's July in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll throw the old canned plugs in here sometime later.
Maybe he will, maybe he won't. It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. The secrets of Jesse Starcher. You'll never know. So, all right, yeah, for Chris Armstrong, for Mark Radulich, I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll catch you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
I got a whole new level of people who involved in this stupid podcast. I am currently recording from the Mobile Studio North. Every issue of this Bendis Ultimus. They'll cut that out in editing, right? Take two.
This has become an unexpected bit for a while now.
Leave me alone. I'm sick. Nailed it.
Okay. All right. I want to come back to that instance that you mentioned about Nick Fury.
The shipping?
No, I'm not going to address that tonight.
Okay.
Save that for another podcast.
And lo, there was much interracial fanfic. I was Google imaging Nick Fury and Spider-Man, and lo, there was much fanfic. No, shit, sorry.
No.
Can we do the podcast over again, but this time with a whiteboard?
Yeah, where's the Charlie Day meme?
Oh, shit. On the way to work this morning, I was like, I was supposed to put a synopsis in there, and I completely forgot about it. And I was like, please tell me I didn't reference it in the episode. Please tell me I didn't reference it in the episode. And I fucking referenced it.
Can I ask that you stop drinking when you're editing? I'm really sorry about all the coughing, guys. Just do an entire gag reel of me coughing and clearing my throat.
That's on the list. It's what Nick Fury makes you out to be. That's what the government says you are.
It's the deals and absolutes. Apologies. I'm not sorry. I take that apology back.
What time did you guys get out of there last night?
It was probably close to 1.
That would have been really approaching Jesse Starcher falling asleep on a podcast.
Yeah, I dove into the CPAP machine.
Dove into it. It's just like laying there on your bed and you just kind of dive face first.
Yeah, I fucking just headbutted the thing onto my face.
Source material bonus content.
So, Mark, how many Tobey Maguire movie references did you see throughout this thing?
Gosh, this story starts, it's all about a girl. Ugh.
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna punch a character so hard in my life. Right, man. I mean, Kirsten Dunst does this punchy face, but the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was such a puss. Ugh.
Well, all right.
I'm not going to defend Toby per se, but I don't think any of the Spider-Man movies touch Spider-Man 2.
That is a classic. The Doc Ock one with that's a good one.
I
think
it's easily the best Spider-Man
of the three.
I have a very popular opinion, a very unpopular opinion, but I liked that last Sony Spider-Man movie. I really did. I actually thought that iteration under Andrew Garfield was probably the closest to Peter Parker. And I liked the world that they were creating. I mean, this plot of that story needs some work, but I remember we started reviewing movies on here because of that. Because, Pat Mullen hated it. Everyone acted shocked. But yeah, like Pat and I got into like a screaming match over the Amazing Spider-Man 2. And it had to be refereed by Robert Winfrey. And X amount of years later, I still have Robert Winfrey hostage watching terrible movies.
So I'm not a big fan of Amazing Spider-Man 2. I do like the first Amazing Spider-Man. And I like parts of Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I got a lot of problems with it.
I went and saw the Amazing Spider-Man in the theaters. That was like the second or third movie I took my daughter to go watch. I didn't hate it. I didn't come out of there hating it. But I do recall sitting there thinking to myself how quick they rebooted that franchise. And I say how quick, but I mean, the original one we said was 2002. Amazing Spider-Man came out in 2011. Hold on, I'm looking.
Jesse, don't pick on Sony. They can't fight back.
Well, Spider-Man 3 came out in 07, I think.
Okay, all right. Amazing Spider-Man 2012.
So it was 5 years later.
Yeah, 5 years since the last installment of the previous series history.
You got to remember something. Spider-Man 4 was in pre-production when they decided to cut it and just reboot the thing. Like, they already had a Spider-Man movie going.
Right.
They just changed direction on it because the reaction to Spider-Man 3 was as good as that Venom.
Has
It was bad.
Had there been a reboot of a franchise within 10 years of the first movie? So Amazing Spider-Man come out in 2012. We just said this Spider-Man movie came out in 2002. So that's 10 years from that first iteration. Has there been any other film franchise that got rebooted that quick?
How many years was there between Last Stand and First Class?
Last Stand was also 07. I think First Class was 2011.
That's 4 years.
Well,
But the first one came out in 2000.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, I'm going with the first.
That's kind of a soft reboot, too, because a lot of the same people, characters, and actors come back in the other movies.
So what did we say? X-Men was 2000. When did the First Class come out?
I think First Class was 2011.
Okay.
All right. Dolph Lundgren Punisher and Tom Jane Punisher.
Tom Jane Punisher?
That was quite a while.
Yeah, I was going to say
That was like 15 years.
89 or 8, what was it 87, 88 of the Lundgren Punisher?
It was 89.
2004. Yeah, so we're probably saying around 15 years for that.
How many years between A Star Is Born and the last A Star Is Born? How many years between RoboCop and RoboCop?
Didn't even fucking answer this one.
88 for the first one. I think
then,
the reboot came out in 2014, maybe?
Yep, I think you're right.
How many years between Total Recall and Total Recall?
I think 87 to, 2016, 2015? I'm not sure when the remake came out. I never saw it.
More than 10 years.
So
Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters.
There we go.
That's quite a gap there.
So my father-in-law, whose house I am currently residing in for the next month, except for when I'm in the hospital, every time we talk, like, he's not a big movie person. He has like his baseball / the football movie with Sandra Bullock movie that he likes. But Blindside, yeah, he has, so he has like a handful that tug at his heart. But for the most part, he's not really a movie person. It's very rare when he goes and he thinks they're dumb. So then there's me, who talks incessantly about movies, movie production, movie finance, and you can see how well we get along. So we had round 106 of why doesn't Hollywood make anything new anymore? And I basically I've answered this question now 100 times, but instead of 101, I just pulled up Box Office Mojo and began reading off the list of movies in the top 10. 9 out of the 10 were franchises. 1 out of 10 came from China, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want to listen to that." But that's the thing, when I was telling him, and he stuck his fingers in his ear and went la 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 over, is that Hollywood will make some small budget movies for purposes of getting rewards or just the things that are pretty low risk, but if they really the studio has to make money, and the only things that make money now are sort of mid to high budget big franchise pictures. They kind of take the roulette wheel approach, which is cover the board, make as many big budget pictures as you can, and if even half of those are successful, you'll make your money back. I mean, if you look at Disney's probably the king of this with all the IP that they have. Because, I mean, the Avengers Endgame is almost over the Avatar mark. They're somewhere in the 2 billions, getting 2.8 billion, getting close to it. But they've also had some, not so great ones. Just off the top of my head, I think the second Alice in Wonderland movie bombed. John Carter bombed. This is going back some. The current iteration of Dumbo didn't do great. Didn't do, I think, what they expected. I mean, and then again, like Aladdin, has almost made $1 billion. Captain Marvel made $1 billion. So, I mean, and then there's like the BFG, which I think like lost tons of money. So Disney, with between all of its studios from Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, et cetera, and then Disney proper, just covers the year in film. And like I said, if half of those make money, then that's a successful year. So why do they keep doing it? Because the formula works. You can deal if you're a big enough studio like that, you can deal with the 1 or 2 misses because you're going to have 3 or 4 hits that hit big. Some of the smallest studios struggle with that. Sony keeps trying to find, they found kind of lightning in a bottle with Venom. But gee whiz, what was Venom? It's a fucking Marvel movie. But they just had a miss with Men in Black. So, And then there's Paramount, who had like 4 out of 5 Transformers movies that knocked it out of the park financially. And then the last one was a pile of dog shit. But their Mission Impossible movies have all made money.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Mark, Earth 1999. The first appearance was in Iron Man, May 2nd of 2008, which happens to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.